Today I'm here with Harrison, who is one of our writers. Nice to have you here, Harrison, in Noyers in Burgundy in France at our team meeting.
It's great to be here.
Nice, nice. So I'm glad you could come. Tell me, Harrison, a little bit about what you do for World History Encyclopedia.
What I do for World History Encyclopedia is mostly researching and writing. So a lot of it is reading goes into it, and then forming it into a 3,000 word narrative that is hopefully entertaining and also educational.
And what kind of topics are you researching and writing about?
Lately, I've been doing a lot of French stuff. French Revolution I started out with, and then I moved to the Napoleonic period, and shortly I'll be moving into the American Revolution, which is exciting stuff.
Nice. Okay. So how does it feel to be in France, in Burgundy, after having covered so much French content?
Well, it's always nice to, see places that you've been reading and writing about and have never actually seen. It's just so beautiful here. I wish that I had spent more time. I was able to spend more time here just to soak everything in. And it was interesting walking around Paris, seeing monuments and things in museums about referencing Napoleonic battles that I'd written about, like even street names and stuff. But yeah, it's a very interesting feel. It's almost like you're walking through history, having written about it and then visiting the spots.
Yeah, because I mean, in Paris there are so many things. This Napoleon, that Napoleon.
Yeah,
There
yeah.
are like metro stations named after Napoleonic things as well, right?
Yeah, yeah. Like you have the Rue de Rivoli after the Battle of Rivoli and stuff like that. It's crazy. Just having that background knowledge and walking around is pretty cool.
Nice, yeah. So, um, how did you get to write for World History Encyclopedia? Like, did you study history, or how did you start?
Yeah, so I've always been very interested in history from a young age. I remember, and writing as well. I remember sitting there reading about actually the French Revolution when I was 9 or 10, and trying to write little narratives about
Really?
it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe I was destined to be here. But I went to college at SUNY Oswego for history. Um, at the time, I didn't think writing was a viable career choice. I thought it was, one of those pipe dreams that people have that not many people get to do. So I studied history and political science. I graduated. About a year later, I was at a Halloween party at Josh, who is a member of the site. He's a writer, and he is also my uncle. And we were talking about my thesis for history, which had to do with Sir William Johnson and the Covenant chain and bringing the Iroquois Confederacy into the French and Indian War. And he asked if I wanted to contribute an article about it. He made sure I knew there's no payment or anything, just a completely voluntary thing. So I did, and I was hooked because it brought me back to when I was a kid writing all that stuff. And I've been writing ever since. I think that was December of 2021 that I first started contributing.
Yeah. Oh, you've written a lot by now.
Yeah, yeah.
So, what is it about writing and history that fascinates you?
Um, I think I'm just fascinated by the story aspect of it because I view history as a big, long tapestry, the story of humankind from the beginning until now, how we got here, why things are the way they are. And I think telling that story is very important, not only for myself and understanding that, but also for spreading the knowledge and the awareness of history. I think it's a very noble thing and very fun as well. I
Yeah.
love crafting the stories on a more personal level.
Yeah.
The crafting and the
What do you mean on a personal level?
well, on the more like noble level, what I was just talking about like, oh yeah, the story of us. But on a personal level, just the fact of uh, crafting these narratives, writing about these things, getting to know historical figures in a way maybe more intimate than you would learn in school, I think is very, very, what's the word? I don't want to say fascinating again, but it is very fascinating and interesting, and I just love it.
Absolutely, yeah. I always like to say that story is the key part of the word history,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because, like you say, it is like a big tapestry of us who
Yeah.
we are, how do we get here.
Yeah, and one thing writing for the site has helped me to understand, especially that long timeline, is you think that ancient Rome is unrelated to the French Revolution, but then when you study the French Revolution, you know that they pulled a lot from Roman stuff and they were very influenced by them. So it really helps you to understand that everything is connected. All of history is leading to this point and will lead into the future. So I find that very I don't want to say fascinating again. I can't think of any other synonyms at the moment, but very interesting, very cool. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's kind of how World History Encyclopedia, when I first started working on it, how it it started as the core idea that everything is connected, and I really thought that a website that is basically built on this idea of different concepts being a web that interconnects across space and time. And that's really at the core of how the website is built. So it's cool to see that you, as a writer and researcher, are feeling that the same thing is important. You know.
Oh yeah, and we were sort of talking about this last night, where you don't really notice this when you're in a class or anything because it's divided into, World War II or medieval. But writing, yeah, you totally pick that up, and especially like you were saying, how the site's designed, it's kind of hard not to. Just realizing, yeah, this is connected to that. That's part of this. It's all just one big story.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've been covering the French Revolution. You've
Yeah.
been covering Napoleon. You said your thesis was about the 7 Years' War, the French and Indian
Yeah.
War, as you call it in the United
Right,
States.
yeah.
What's next?
I don't know. I'm excited to see where it takes me, really. Whatever needs to be covered. The good thing is I'm interested in all sorts of aspects, all sorts of places. So wherever you decide to send me on, I'll be excited to go.
Is there like a period of history that interests you the most?
Well, lately, I wanted to do French Revolution because I've always been interested in that period. The people rising up against this, foundation of society and just overthrowing it has fascinated me. And I think revolutions in general I've always been very interested in for that reason. But I don't know, 18th, 19th century is kind of my jam. It's where I like to live.
Okay.
Yeah, just the whole feel of it, the history, the atmosphere. But
Yeah, I know what you mean because by me, I started Ancient History Encyclopedia before
Right,
it was
right.
World History Encyclopedia. I was always very interested in ancient history, and after I was at university, I started working in the games industry as a game designer for historical strategy games, the Total War series. And so in 2006, and I did not know what game I would be working on because it had not been announced yet.
oh wow, okay.
And so the first day I come into the office, my first day at work, and I'm like, what's the game about? And they're like, oh, it's the 18th century. And I'm like, that's the most boring thing ever. But it's only that I thought that. It's because I did not know
Yeah.
anything about it. And then, I was researching so much about the 18th century for that game that suddenly I realized that it's this era that is so full of history, that is an era where things really sort of changed from sort of the early medieval period to the modern period, where it was an era of upheaval, technological revolution,
Okay.
social revolution, exploration, colonization, everything. It's
Everything
really
you want
interesting.
is packed in.
It's true.
And it's funny that you mentioned that because I'm pretty sure Empire Total War, if that's the one you're
Yep.
referring to, might be the reason why this is my area of interest because that was the first real historical game I played. And
Really?
I put hundreds of hours into that game.
Nice.
And then I moved on to, Rome 2 and the original Rome, but that
Yeah.
may have been where I got my love of the time period.
Ah,
So,
nice. Yeah, well,
interesting connection there.
I did a lot of work on Empire. That's what got me my games career started, which is now
Wow,
over
yeah.
because I'm not doing history only. But that was fun.
Oh, yeah.
That was fun. Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Still waiting for the sequel, hopefully, one day.
Me too. I honestly don't know what they're working on. But yeah. Okay. So, you touch on historical games. I think this is something that's really interesting, actually, because I think many people play historical games, and you said it really got you hooked.
Yeah.
What was it about the game that got you hooked? Really, do you feel like a game can get people hooked in a different way than say a movie or a TV series or a book can?
Um, yeah, maybe. I know for Empire Total War and games like it focus on more of a like a nation scale. Like you're playing as France, you gotta build your empire, administer it, take over other places. So on a maybe on a more of a macro scale, those kinds of games help. And then movies I feel like tend to be more. You have the characters that are more intimate, individualized, but of course, video games can be like that too.
Right.
You have Red Dead Redemption 2,
Oh
which
yeah.
got a lot of people into the Wild West.
Oh, I bet. Yeah. The
But yeah, I
Assassin's Creed
think
franchise is
Oh,
really
of
big as
course,
well.
yeah,
Yeah.
Assassin's Creed. But I think the bottom line is with games, maybe it can bring you in more because you're playing as either a character or as a government. So instead of a movie or a book where you're reading about this is what happened, this guy did this thing, you're experiencing it. Like you're immersed in the world of that time period. So yeah, I think games can maybe reach you on a different level.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And different subject. Let's go back to what you do at WHE.
Sure,
Even
yeah.
though I love talking about games,
Oh,
right?
of
But
course, yeah.
um, can you explain a little bit your process? Like you say you write about Napoleonic era
Yeah.
or something. How do you do that? How do you get started? I mean, it's vast, right?
Oh yeah, starting a new topic definitely always is a little bit anxiety inducing. Like, okay, how am I going to break this up? How many articles or pieces am I going to need to do? I usually just take some time to read a couple books, maybe get a summary of the period to refresh my brain about it. But then once I get into it, it kind of falls into place. Like you read two or three books about the Napoleonic Wars, you see what they all mention. You see, okay, so this battle is more important than this one. I should probably prioritize this. And then maybe I'll do some digging, try and find some other information about that particular battle or person or whatever. So I think I start with the reading, and then the reading continues until the end. But I figure out from those books what I'm going to be writing about and what I can kind of leave behind for now, maybe come back to later.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. And what kind of books do you use to do the research?
I try and get as many different sources as I can. You want to have a couple primary sources if you can find them. Popular history books are helpful. I basically just do a bit of research. I see what leading historians have written recently. What you might find in a Barnes and Noble. What the average history enthusiast might be looking at. Something maybe a little less dense. And I kind of go from there.
So, if I understand that right, you're essentially taking a mix of sources. You look at academic sources, you look at primary sources, and you look at more of the popular history
Yeah.
to get an understanding of what is it that people expect,
Yes.
as well as what is it that the latest sort of research is showing. Is that right?
Yeah, basically.
I see. Okay. And how long would you say, like, maybe hard to put in together, right? But how long do you think you, on average, take in terms of research versus writing for like an article?
I would say it depends on how much knowledge I have, pre-existing knowledge I have.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and how easily the books are washing down.
Okay.
I try to take maybe a week to orient myself and read through books, skim some books, read through others more heavily. But I try and get writing after a week of starting a new topic.
Okay. And then do you pick, like, what kind of articles do you start with?
I like to go chronologically, so I'll start. French Revolution. I think I chose a few primer topics. I started with the French involvement in the American Revolution. I moved on to the Estates General, storming of the Bastille, and I kind of worked my way through that. Then when I got to the end, I did important figures, and then the broad French Revolution definition. I think that definitely helps because for the broader definition, it gives you time to realize, okay, what's important to put into these 3,000 word limit. And then you see which historical figures pop up through your other articles. Okay,
Right.
which of these are, the most important to have their own definition at this point. Like maybe you could circle back later when you get a free moment. But for the French Revolution example, you see Robespierre all the time, of course. You see Danton, you see all those figures. Marie Antoinette, obviously. But
Right, of course. She's popular.
oh yes,
Maybe not so much at the time, but
no,
nowadays. Yeah. Okay, so basically, you're a full-time staff writer, right? And so you basically take a whole week to research before you dive into the writing.
yeah.
And once you start writing, do you continue researching as
Oh
well?
yeah, yeah. For me, researching continues until I'm done with the topic.
Okay.
Because the first week is just to get sort of like a priming research to figure out what I need to write about, to sort of organize my schedule. And then for each topic, I go back and I read more in depth about each individual piece. And I try to pull from multiple sources for each piece. If I have a biography about Napoleon, I'll try and get a couple more, and then I'll read through the ones that are about the Napoleonic Wars. I just try and I don't want to have one piece dominating an article or anything.
Right, yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense, of course, yeah. Because you can't necessarily know if that source gets everything right.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you ever find discrepancies between different academic books, for example?
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of the times it's something small where it's probably a typo, where a date's wrong or a name's wrong. But other times, like whole events, you find it in one book and you're like, okay, that's cool. Can this be corroborated in some other book? And then you can't find it, and then I feel really sad I can't include it because usually it's a great story, but I can't corroborate it, so I don't want to put it in one of my pieces.
Fair enough, fair enough. And do you ever feel like it's difficult to turn this academic writing into something that's more for the general public?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting line to walk between more dramatic style of writing, like you might find in a fictional novel, and then the drier academic writing. I think
Right.
you need to have a little bit of excitement, but of course you can't make it some sort of like, dramatic fluff. You got to have the the dates and the important stuff that students and the general public need to know.
Yeah.
But I try to keep it as exciting as I can, and I try not to get too dry at the same time.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. That's,
Yeah.
very much encompasses basically what our mission has been from the
Right, yeah.
beginning, right? Since
Yeah.
2009. That's great. Okay. And so, since we don't have an office, dear viewer, we do not have an office. We all work from home all over the world. Where does your particular part of magic take place?
Yeah, so I live in the Hudson Valley, near the town of Statsburg and Hyde Park. So during the winter time, I have this little corner in one of the rooms where I have another monitor. I have some books lying about. I have a bookshelf. But if I can, I love to get outside. I love to go down by the river, a park. I think I work best when I'm outdoors for some reason, just in nature. So whether I'm reading or writing, I like to get outside if I can.
So you basically take your pile of books and your laptop and you sit by the Hudson River on some sort of deck chair and you do your research and your writing?
Ideally, yeah.
That sounds pretty idyllic. You're selling the dream.
Yeah, I walk into the park, hands full of books.
Amazing. That's
Yeah.
really cool.
I'll get a coffee.
Okay.
Like I
Nice.
said, when I was a kid, I wanted to do something like this. I didn't think it was a job you could actually have. So I am living the dream as far as I'm concerned.
Nice, nice. Very cool, very
Yeah.
cool. And now we're here in France, and in essentially like a castle, which is pretty
Yeah.
cool. Do you feel like visiting places like this brings you closer to the history?
Oh, for sure. I mean, you could practically see the history in the walls, to be a little bit poetic there. But yeah, especially, since I've been writing about a lot of France stuff, this is, crazy. Like just getting the echoes of history. I was telling you, like I was watching in Paris, I was watching people going down the river in these crew boats, and I was picturing the Vikings from like 868 or whenever it was, invading the city. So
Right,
just
yeah.
things like that, like my vivid imagination just playing history.
Brings it alive for sure. Yeah, I think that's really important. And it's like, I remember when I was in the Forum Romanum in Rome, and I would, so mostly ruins, really, unfortunately. But, you picture these columns rising up and
Yeah,
people
yeah.
going around, and Julius Caesar on the steps getting murdered, and that's, it's this this is quite something, I think, to actually be in a place where you know something has happened, you know?
Yeah, yeah. It's one thing to read about it, like we've been saying, but to point to the spot and be like, yeah, that's where Caesar was killed.
Right.
That's something else entirely.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
insane, right? Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, this is great to have you here, and
Yeah, it's great to be here, of course. Thank you for
nice, yeah.
having me.
Is there something like you want to tell your readers maybe
Um,
about yourself, about history, about anything really? The world, the
well,
universe.
well, I don't know if I have any information about the universe, but I want to say thank you for being a reader. Every single pair of eyes on both my own work and the website in general definitely means a lot. So, yeah, thank you for reading. You're the reason why we get to do this. So